Hey guys, it's Jack here, and today we're going to be doing something a little bit different than the usual content. As you can probably see on your screen right now, there is no visuals, because today is our first ever podcast of Overanalyzed. I'm joined by Shane, a workmate of mine. Say hi, Shane.
Hey guys.
He's here to help me pick apart the timeline placement for Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, which is coming out in, 2 weeks now or so?
It's March 3rd, so I would place it at about 2, maybe 2.5 weeks.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
So, we had an initial placement for the timeline, putting Breath of the Wild right after Skyward Sword.
Oh yes, I think we had many hours placed into that theory.
Oh yes, we didn't we stay up till 1 in the morning after work?
I believe so, but that's the whole point, right? Overanalyze.
Yeah. Me and him, we both get off work at about 10, or at least I used to before my schedule changed.
Right.
And we got off work at 10 and just sat in the parking lot talking about Zelda, Resident Evil, all kinds of games until literally 1 in the morning before we realized, hey, we should probably go home.
Yeah. Good old days, right?
Only like 2 months ago, but yeah.
Oh, but yeah, we're huge fans of The Legend of Zelda, But
probably will be for years to come.
Oh, I'm sure.
Unless they just bomb it with this one, but I doubt it.
I doubt it. It looks amazing.
Hell, even if it was terrible, I'd probably still play it for years. I still go back to the older games sometimes.
Oh yeah, heck, I still go back to A Link to the Past.
I've got Oracle of Ages and Seasons on my computer. I still play them from I'd say at least once a month, just a little throwback. I used to spend so many hours on those games.
On your computer, eh? I'm sure.
I would have them in hand if they weren't in storage.
No, I do. I have them. I have both of them actually. I went ahead and bought both for the remaster, or not remaster, but kind of backwards compatible thing the 3DS did. I have both of them on there, as well as Link's Awakening.
Oh, that sounds nice. I really want to get that.
Yeah, so I play all of those on occasion, but
no, I've been spending a lot of hours up until recently. Of course, I spent a lot of hours with Hyrule Warriors, because I've been wanting that for years, and then I finally bought it in November, and it was addictive. It was really good.
Yeah, I haven't had the chance to play it, to be honest, and I've kind of wanted to. It looks good.
You need to come over. If you've ever played Dynasty Warriors, it's the same basic concept just with Zelda, and it makes it so much more worth it.
See, I have not. But I have not played Dynasty Warriors. Sorry, let me be.
Okay, well, I've got 2 and 3 on my shelf right here. So
you're like, you have
want
to
come
play
over
that
and play all 3. Just so you have to know where it came from. You have to play the originals.
Yeah, right. Because that's definitely the original to The Legend of Zelda.
Well, the Hyrule Warriors, at least.
Yeah.
Okay, so we had it placed in Skyward Sword time simply because of. Not simply, I can't say simply because there were so many reasons. The way I saw it was mostly due to the art style. It was really fitting with the Skyward Sword. Link looks like he's 10 years older, so let's say Skyward Sword ends and 10 years go by, and then he gets sealed away wherever it is he gets sealed away. It just, it seemed to make sense. But then with this recent interview with Anuma that you told me about, where he confirmed that it takes place after Ocarina of Time. And what else was he told me? Didn't he say it doesn't take place in a certain timeline as well?
He said it does not take place with the Wind Waker timeline.
Ah, right. So which leaves the Twilight Princess timeline and the Originals timeline. The Child and Downfall timeline.
Yes, sorry. Yes. Yeah. Yes.
I was using my own filler terms there.
Now, he did say one more thing about it, and that was that it would be in a timeline that we've fought Ganon several times before. And looking at them side by side here, I mean, Child Era, you only have 3 actual games. One being the main villain, one might argue, is more Vati than Ganondorf and Ganon. Whereas the Downfall timeline is you fight Ganon in almost every single one. Specifically Ganon, not even Ganondorf.
Oh yeah, definitely. 'Cause, I mean, there's the 2 original games. You fight him in those, and then... I'm losing my voice still. A Link to the Past is in there as well, right?
Yes.
I don't have the timeline in front of me like you do. I've got the Game Informer Breath of the Wild review.
Yeah. So Link to the Past is the one placed after Ocarina of Time in the Downfall timeline, but there is a time before that where the Imprisoning War took place. And I've seen several theories stating that they think it is in between those two, Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past.
Of course, that would place this Link as being the Ocarina of Time Link, correct?
Yes.
And maybe it's just me due to other fan theories through the years, but that doesn't really sit right with me. I really feel like it should be after the. I feel like it should kind of be after a Link Between Worlds.
Yes, I honestly agree with that. In fact, when they placed it here, that's where I said, because it falls perfectly. It sits between A Link Between Worlds and the original Legend of Zelda, and that's what he took the most inspiration from. So I think it falls good there, but also just the look, the aesthetic of it, of the game that we're about to see with Breath of the Wild. Uh, you've got a world that's just on the verge of being done.
Yeah, decrepit, decayed, torn apart, and
that's what we see
if
with
something
the
big and explosive happens here to break down all those towers that are being built, it would leave a world behind to be the original Legend of Zelda.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the original doesn't have a lot of story behind it either. I mean, there's the really basic concept of Ganon's kidnapped Zelda, go and rescue her,
right?
Gather the 8 pieces of the Triforce, and that's.
I mean,
really it.
there is the main part of the story with the original Legend of Zelda is the more the backstory. What Zelda did with the whole when he kidnapped her, or I should say before he kidnapped her, she split the Triforce of Wisdom into 8 pieces. And spread them across the world, and that way Ganon couldn't get his hands on them. And that's the most, like you said, the most story that we get from that game.
But actually repeating it like that, it makes it sound like Ganon wins in this game.
He does not. You do regather the 8 pieces of the Triforce of Wisdom, plus you have the Triforce of Courage.
No, I meant like in Breath of the Wild. Sorry, I was switching topics.
Yeah, if it is the backstory of this, we could potentially see him get Zelda. And at that point, we could see Zelda break these pieces apart. But there's one thing that makes it seem he doesn't win in this new game, and that's the fact that it does stay in the original Legend of Zelda that he was resurrected, which means he was dead.
Okay, so the resurrection would change it up, so we do end up killing him again.
Yes.
All right. And it just, I feel like that, like you mentioned earlier, that a lot of people were theorizing that it would be after Ocarina of Time, and I didn't go into detail on it, and I probably should now. I'm one of those people that I very, very strongly believe in the Majora's Mask is Link's death theory.
Right.
And I feel like the downfall timeline, the way we discussed it earlier, it can only happen after Link goes forward into the future, correct?
Right.
Because didn't they mention that it happened in the big battle between him and Ganondorf at the end?
It does not strictly speak of it that I'm aware of. Let me see if I can find that real quick. So it does say he challenged him in battle, which means it would place it at that point in which he battled him, and it says he lost at that point. So it would be after he was it would be while he was adult Link.
Which means that it has to happen in the alternate reality that would eventually lead to Wind Waker, per se. Because let's say Link dies in that battle. He can no longer go back in time to change the future.
Right.
So the child timeline cannot possibly exist.
That seems to be the thing. If the hero's defeated timeline does, then the child line cannot seem to exist. On the flip side of that,
so you can only have the heroes defeated, though.
But on the flip side of that, if you have the adult and the child timeline, then it's as if the hero is defeated doesn't make any sense. Because you have two different theories there.
You can have the adult and child timelines running in parallel to each other.
Yes.
But you cannot have both of them and the defeated timeline as existing in essentially whenever Link goes back in time and changes the future, he creates 2 parallel universes.
Yes.
One where he didn't change things and one where he did, or something like that. Or no, it's the future where he didn't change things but then defeated Ganondorf, and then the future where he did change things and therefore never fought Ganondorf, creating the Wind Waker timeline and the Twilight Princess timeline.
Right.
And those can exist in parallels in 2 different universes, but in no way can those ones happen if the defeat timeline happens.
Now, if the
Sorry.
defeat timeline was to happen, but at that point create a split, creating both the adult era and the defeated timeline, then the adult era would once again split because he does go back in time, leaving the adult era while creating the child era. So it can potentially be all three is a possibility, but the way they have it outlined here in the timeline, the time and placement that they have on each one does not make any sense for that.
Yeah, it's a thing I have trouble comprehending a lot of. But I'm one of those people that I believe that Majora's Mask is a game about Link's death.
Yes.
He's died. It's all about his acceptance. It's a theory that's been around for a while. I think Matt Pat on Game Theory was one of the first to throw it out there. Or at least he's the first place I saw it.
Mm-hmm.
And it just stuck so well with me. The symbolism in the game just makes perfect sense for all of that.
Right.
But the way it's described with the theory in tandem with the skeleton or the hero of old in Twilight Princess that trains that Link, it says that he's filled with regret, basically.
Mm-hmm.
He has regret for not training the next hero, which would almost imply that Link lives past the fight with Ganondorf and then dies at a later date.
Mm-hmm.
Now, part of me is okay with believing that would happen. Let's say it happens while Link is fighting Ganon. He dies, the defeated hero timeline is created.
Okay.
Let's say they adjust the timeline to move Majora's Mask to be a split that happens not really on the same timeline, but in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be okay with it. But this, if we were to place Breath of the Wild after Ocarina of Time on the defeated hero timeline, it would almost kind of break it for me,
mm-hmm.
that theory. It would at least break the timeline, because let's say that Link dies in his fight against Ganondorf. Now, I know it technically only states that he is defeated, not that he dies.
Right.
But let's say, for example, that he does die in that battle. It would immediately create Link's Majora's Mask experience, and then later down the road, Twilight Princess, he comes back as a ghost and does all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Which puts it in a separate tangent from the defeated hero, which isn't possible based on the timeline itself.
Right. Now, I have been one that, to be honest, it could be argued, and it fits fairly well, that if we take Majora's Mask and say it is just Link being in another place, it is not his death, honestly, with what is on the child timeline and what is on the defeat timeline, could potentially be all one timeline.
Yeah, I would have no issue with putting all of them into one timeline and trying to find a way to make it work, because with every new game that Nintendo makes, they could potentially piece the world together to create one timeline. Maybe it was just something I heard, and I told you about this the other day, but I could have sworn I remember hearing somewhere that Aonuma kind of regretted making the timeline. He said it wasn't what he wanted to do. He didn't like it. Maybe he liked us guessing, having everyone guess.
Yeah.
But I could have sworn I heard him say somewhere that he just didn't like it. I think you filled me in somewhere else that you told me later that it's not that he didn't like it, but he had to build it for the sake of Wind Waker.
Yeah, like I've felt that way, to be honest. And I'm not saying that is something he said, but I kind of believe it, because, as I said, looking not just at the order that they put the timeline in, but more specifically also at the order that the game's released, it appears as if directly from the beginning there was only one timeline, and that the split only happened because of games where, and granted, this comes into a quote that I have heard, where they say that they want to concentrate on gameplay first. And so you have instances like Twilight Princess, where it was originally supposed to use Wind Waker's assets, leftover assets, to build a game. It was not meant to be quite like Twilight Princess. And
yeah, it was supposed to have that more cartoonish feel to it.
Right, and then you also have instances where, with Majora's Mask, which was supposed to be kind of somewhat a rehash of Ocarina of Time, using its leftover assets, but he wanted to make a brand new game, and they gave him 1 year to work on it, and there we have Majora's Mask, which is still an amazing game, don't get me wrong, but because of these instances we get situations where they don't fit together well.
Yeah.
They're not cohesive, so to speak. They can be pieced together, but they're not cohesive. And therefore, potentially what caused the idea of the split timeline to kind of explain how it's happening.
Yeah. Because if everything was put onto one timeline, which I know this is like an age-old argument that people are done with, because they released the Zelda timeline, the Hyrule Historia, why argue about making one singular timeline, right?
Right.
But it's something that I still so adamantly believe could be possible.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of games that would make more sense to have them placed that way. Let's say, for example, Majora's Mask is about Link's death. You could place it directly after Ocarina of Time, and it would make sense to put it there, and then Twilight Princess later on for that simple reason alone.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say that theoretically everything was still on one timeline, and we had to add in Breath of the Wild, and it was to go directly after Ocarina of Time.
Mm-hmm.
That theory could still work by placing it, excuse me, between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. The Ocarina of Time stuff happens, he's frozen in time for 100 years, comes out, does Breath of the Wild, dies after or at the end of the story, and then there's theories about whenever people, and I guess not really theories, but beliefs, that when people die, they can relive certain moments or see their life flash before their eyes in like a childlike state. There's, I guess, theories about heaven that whenever you're there, you'll be in the prime of your life,
right.
per se.
Right.
So what if in Majora's Mask, in his death, he's in his happy place initially?
Youth.
He's in a forest, he's riding his horse upon it, he's searching for his friend, his fairy, and he's in his child form, the way he was for the first 11 years of his life.
Right.
And, when he skipped forward 7 years in time, he essentially was a child in an adult body, so who's to say he doesn't still feel like a kid?
Right.
Place that after Breath of the Wild, and you would still have the same result. He dies, does Majora's Mask, and then later Twilight Princess. Or, I guess, technically Twilight Princess because he's a skeleton ghost thing. But
yeah,
it's little details like that can help shape an entire world, or the storyline itself. And
right.
I feel like making the split almost causes more issues than it solves.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I would like to see a singular timeline. Something I can definitively say, this is one story that I can follow from beginning to end. It's not I have to think about, well, where's this going to be placed as far as, timeline-wise. Like which timeline, rather than which timeline I want to think about, okay, where in the timeline.
Yeah, and this is something I said before, that if it were my way, we would have one solid timeline that consists of and uses every game somewhere or another.
Right.
But at the very least, I want to, if the split timeline is something that I'm forced to wrap my head around, I have no other reason, it's mentioned in the games that that's how it works, and I have to accept it.
Yeah.
Then...
Yeah, you have mentioned that quite often, that you would prefer it to be mentioned in-game, because in-game
as it is, the only reason we have
thing.
To believe this theory is the book itself.
Right.
And, I get it, it's made by the developers, it's made by the guys that make the game, so they have a say in it, they have, this all-godly authority over what's real.
Right.
But, as a gamer, it's something I prefer, even if it was some hypothetical thing that is sarcastically mentioned in the games, that would help confirm it for me.
Right.
But I'm asking too much right there. Then and there, I'm asking too much. I'm asking people walking around with swords to talk about alternate timelines.
Right.
Because that makes sense.
Yeah, they're just trying to stay alive while Ganon's attacking them.
Yeah. But I think I mentioned this before, that if any timeline were to be the real timeline, I believe it to be the child timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because when it comes to games and people dying in a game, unless it's something that is taken into account in the game, and there's certain games where if you die, they mention in the game that you're reborn as a clone and things like that. Or it's another iteration, a new alternate reality, weird meta stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But in Legend of Zelda, you die, you go back to your most previous save, and you continue. There is nowhere in the story that they mention, hey, you died, what happened? There's nothing like that.
Right.
It's like the retelling of a story, and in this story, the hero doesn't die.
Mm-hmm.
You play Ocarina of Time from beginning to end. The cutscenes do not have a result where you die. If you die, there isn't a result that says Ganon wins. Now, the original Zelda, I think there's one where it does have that.
Mm-hmm.
In Ocarina of Time, you just get a game over screen. So the way I
But
see
the
it, if you play
original
the
Zelda,
story,
I'm not sure if it does or not, but I know the second one, The Adventure of Link, if you were to die, Ganon does appear. Because the whole point of that one
yeah,
is...
and he does the weird laughter.
Yeah, because the whole point of that one is he is not resurrected. They're trying to resurrect him. And the whole point of the game is once you beat it, you actually stop the resurrection. So he never technically would be resurrected. Whereas on the flip side of that, if you lose, then they're sitting there going, okay, he's resurrected. And that's what that game over screen was about.
Yeah, and that one would make more sense to me because it's that game over screen in it of itself adds a new layer to the story. It adds an effect that says if you lose, an alternate reality is created.
Right.
That in itself is that right there is what I'm talking about. It's mentioned not really mentioned in the game, but
shown in some way.
It's pretty much shown in some way in the game that an alternate reality would be created.
Exactly.
So if they had a split that happened after Zelda 2,
and even
I would
then
have no issues with it.
Even then, it doesn't necessarily say an alternate reality is created, but the idea that it shows that, but then you can restart, would show that there could potentially be two timelines that would split off of that.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to place a game that's in a separate timeline where where Link failed, it would make sense. You go into the game, you die, you get the game over screen, and it shows Ganon being revived, then voila, it would make sense. Yeah. But in Ocarina of Time, it's just you fall to your knees, game over. That's it.
Well, see, that's actually something I want to bring up about the new game, Breath of the Wild, is they have confirmed that it will have at least 2 different endings. Now, I don't know how many, but they said one thing you will see in here is that you have to kind of learn from your death. They won't tell you when you're ready to go fight Calamity Ganon. You'll have to figure that out. So you can potentially die in this one. And they may and probably will have some sort of screen or showing that you did and something happened.
And if they put a split in the Hyrule Historia to show after that because of that screen, I would have no issue with it.
Right.
You know, it would just make more sense. I was going to finish a thought and I just forgot
I'm sorry.
Now it happens all the time.
But I do get what you're saying, because with Ocarina of Time, you know...
Oh, I remember what I was saying.
Okay, go ahead and finish it.
I was going to say that since if you play the game from beginning to end and there's no screen where Link dies in Ocarina of Time, well, I mean, aside from him falling to his knees, there's no screen that specifically calls out Ganon winning or anything like that.
Right.
Whenever Link dies, I feel like the defeat timeline is an impossibility.
Mm-hmm.
It felt like a cop-out for me because the game developers, in my opinion, were like, hey, we can't place any of these games anywhere on the timeline. Let's just, Ocarina of Time, Link dies, let's make an alternate reality. But in that logic, it means they could make a tangent at any point in any game from any Link dying to make another title, and it gives them this infinite web to place stuff in.
Right.
And I feel like that's a cop-out.
Yeah, I don't like that either, because what if they jump up to Skyward Sword and say, well, he lost against Demise, Demise rose up.
Yeah, here's a whole alternate reality where Demise was ruler.
Yep. Oh, and now we don't have any, everything. We have a split timeline there that eventually reaches a split there that splits into 3, You start getting into this thing that's like...
There's so much they could do, and so many ways to kind of cheat. And don't get me wrong, if they want to do that, they can. They're the developers, they can do whatever the hell they want.
Right.
I would feel cheated as a Zelda fan if they didn't work a little harder to put it in one timeline, or at least close to.
Now, I would play the game still because
it's because it's Zelda.
Yeah, because of that one statement. They concentrate on gameplay first, game features
and
first.
They always have. All the games have been very fun to play.
Oh, yes.
They can be challenging, but they're always fun.
Absolutely.
Some of the jokes that are thrown in there are good too. Little comments here and there.
Mm-hmm.
I think Oracle of Ages, I loved Ralph. He was cocky and arrogant, but he was just fun to interact with in the game.
Right.
But I was going to say that with that, it means that the downfall timeline, I feel, is an impossibility, leaving the child and adult timelines. And considering you go through the child timeline, you get teleported to the future, you fight Ganon, and then in the game, there is a cutscene that shows you being sent back in time. Right. That is a guaranteed happening, so Link definitely gets sent back. And then it's heavily implied, although not exactly shown, that he stops Ganondorf.
Right.
That's later confirmed with Twilight Princess, with him being sealed away. And even in the beginning of Wind Waker, that shows that he's defeated. So either way, the way I feel, the same result would be there.
Right.
I feel like the second he went back in time, it completely erased the adult timeline from happening. So I feel like if there was one true timeline that did actually happen,
You're losing your voice there.
Yes, I am. You can hear it, can't you?
I can. But I do have one thing to say.
I feel like it would be the child timeline.
I agree with that, but I do have one thing to say. As far as the child and adult timelines, have we thought about this? That maybe the split, the idea, the reason they created these two timelines is not because of Link so much as because of Zelda. I mean, there is supposed to be emphasis on Zelda, and so it's more what happened after he left with Zelda in that timeline. In other words, why there would be a new timeline.
I mean, I can. It would make sense to me. It makes sense to me that, like we said earlier, that whenever he gets sent back in time, it creates a split with two separate timelines happening. You know,
right?
Here's what happens. You know, after Link already conquered everything, got the Triforce of Power, and was sealed away. Here's what happened when he never got a hold of the Triforce of Power. You know, two alternate paths.
Right.
If I wanted to know what the real one was, I believe it would be the child timeline. And I realize we've gone on quite a bit of a tangent and haven't actually talked about Breath of the Wild, honestly,
right,
for the most part.
And there is a lot about Breath of the Wild. In fact, one thing that I wanted to point out, which brings in both Breath of the Wild and Ocarina of Time. So in Breath of the Wild, we see the kind of ruins of the Temple of Time.
And it is very dilapidated.
If I remember correctly, let me see if I can pull something up here real quick. I believe the Temple of Time was built by Rauru, the sage.
Yes, the book, I think Hyrule History says that Rauru is the one that built it to seal away the entrance to the Sacred Realm.
Right. And if that is the case, then we have an instance that I did not notice before. In our original placement right after Skyward Sword, we have something here that states that the Sacred Realm is sealed before the establishment of the Hyrule Kingdom.
True.
And that makes me wonder, because we see both the Hyrule Kingdom and the temple 100 years in the past, right?
Yeah.
And so it makes me wonder, what about Rauru? Because if our theory was correct and it was Skyward Sword Link, I'm pretty sure
Rauru
that name was never used in Skyward Sword.
No, it wasn't. He was never there.
And we had talked about other people being left on the surface, but would he? Because I feel like he wouldn't. Like, he would have at least been an adult when he led. He sealed the Sacred Realm. Yeah. He would not have been a child.
No, he would not have been. Rauru would have at least been an adult, yes.
And that makes me think there might have been more of a substantial wait or time span than we originally thought with that 10 years.
Yeah, because we theorized that about if the game was to be placed after Skyward Sword, it would be roughly 10 years after Link saves the world. He goes down and they begin to set up a small town, village. Maybe 10 years is enough time to build a small castle.
Right.
They get things started and he gets sealed away for 100 years. Now, that right there pretty much throws the theory out, but everything else fit really well.
Oh, it did. And that's why it surprised me there with the thing. The two pieces there that I had not read before. Sorry about that.
Yeah, reading that just kind of.
Yeah. Now there was also the thought that Rauru might have been someone who was left on the surface, and so he's already around during the Skyward Sword game, but he's on the surface.
That could be a potential possibility, but is there anyone else that we actually encounter on the surface? Because so far as I'm aware, it's only animals and creatures, aside from Girahim, but I don't think that really counts.
We see Impa.
And Impa, true.
And we see a Goron. And we see Zoras.
So it could be a possibility that Rauru was there if he's from, maybe not like the Impa tribe, but from that kind of era. There's the chance of other survivors. He could have been there before, and hearing about the defeat of Demise from wherever he hears about it from,
Right.
he could have shown up.
And from my understanding now, I may be wrong on this part, but I believe that the Hylians were originally just normal people, and it wasn't until she sent them up into the sky with her blessing that they became what is now known as the Hylians.
True.
So I believe
here's something I just realized.
That there are other people out there.
So something I just realized.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when or how long the Triforce has been around. I know it's from the very beginning of time or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But how long has it been accessible and around for people to access and try to claim? Because in Skyward Sword, there's the ruins of the Temple of Time in the desert, in Lanayru Desert, with the Triforce emblems everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So how long have people been fighting and hunting over it? Because with the battle with Demise, it's not mentioned that it's a battle over the Triforce. It was simply a fight with demons.
It says
there's no mention of a war over the Triforce.
Yes, it does. It says, during the era of the goddess Hylia, many demons arose in pursuit of the Triforce. The leader, Demise, the Demon King, tried to take over the world with his evil powers.
Damn me and my memory, I guess.
Now, that being said, it's still something that kind of intrigues me, because it was free up until the point after Skyward Sword where it was sealed in the Sacred Realm. And at that point, we don't really see it again until Ocarina of Time, where the split happens, because we have a moment where Ganondorf gets his hands on the Triforce. We have a moment where he does not, in both the adult and the child timeline, but different ways that it happens. Which is kind of interesting, but weird at the same time.
That is pretty weird. There's actually a lot to think about.
Yeah. There's actually something else that is kind of intriguing to me. And that is A Link to the Past. I believe.
See, I never actually beat A Link to the Past. That's one of the few games I did not beat.
How dare you?
I know, it's like blasphemy to not have beaten Link to the Past, but
I can't believe you.
I beat all of the overworld dungeons, and then I went to the not spirit realm, the Sacred Realm dungeons, and I had so much trouble getting to the one in the desert. I could never do it. It took me ages to figure out how to open the door to the temple, or the dungeon that was in town, in the Sacred Realm. I finally did that one, and barely made it through.
Right.
But I could never figure out how to get into the swamp.
You gotta travel back and forth. But
yeah, I would do that. I'd get to the area where I'm supposed to get in, try traveling back and forth. I could just never do it. I guess I couldn't figure it out, couldn't line it up in the right spot. It was impossible for me to do.
Well,
and I just
need to
gave
go
up
back
after,
because I think you can do it now. I believe in you.
I tried just 6 months ago.
Oh, okay. Well,
I still can't do it.
I could show you.
I need to look up a guide, but I don't want to because then I'll feel like I'm cheating.
I could show you, but regardless, that's getting a little off topic. What I was going to say about
that's what we do.
A Link to the Past is that the Sacred Realm, as you speak, was called in that game the Dark World. And it
was, wasn't it?
Right, and it was supposed to be the Sacred Realm, but during the Sealing War, Ganon was sealed inside the Sacred Realm, the Imprisoning War. He was sealed inside the Sacred Realm, and due to his wish on the Triforce, it turned the Sacred Realm into the Dark World.
So this is one where he has gained access to the Triforce. He's basically gotten his demon form.
But here's what confuses me. From my understanding, originally, it wasn't until he was sealed in the Sacred Realm that he created the Dark World. But in the timeline here, just the straight timeline, I'm not even looking in the games right now, just the straight timeline, under the Ocarina of Time title, before the split, it says the Sacred Realm becomes the Dark World. Which means the Dark World would technically, or the Sacred Realm as the Dark World, would technically exist inside all three timelines.
It would. Unless, what if Ganon didn't wish to turn the Sacred Realm into the Dark World, but to create the Dark World? What if the Dark World, Actually, that doesn't kind of work.
This
It
straight
doesn't really
up
work
says
whenever
the sacred realm
Oh,
becomes
it
the
does,
dark
doesn't it?
world.
Yeah, okay, I missed that.
But
So yeah, then it would technically exist in all three.
Yeah.
But when did he get his hands on the Triforce to make that wish?
Yeah. So
Because for that to have happened, it had to have happened after he got a hold of the Triforce, which can only be in the adult or downfall timelines.
right, and that's what's really throwing me off.
I wonder if maybe that was just a typo and they placed it in the wrong spot.
Maybe, but one could argue that means there could be typos all in here.
Yeah, I'll argue that. There's like 2 whole timelines of typos.
Yeah. Just the mentioning of there being those 3 timelines.
It just sets me off. I can't stand it.
So in the actual writings on the games themselves, not just in the timeline, it does put it after the split, that the Demon King obtains the complete Triforce. So it says, of all possible outcomes, Link, the hero of time, faced defeat at the hands of Ganondorf. The thief obtained the 3 pieces of the Triforce, transformed into the Demon King Ganon, and continued to threaten the world in future eras. The conflict surrounding the Triforce continued without end. The blood of the gods weakened, and the kingdom of Hyrule shrank to a shadow of its former glory. Which does kind of fit with the idea of Breath of the Wild kind of being broken.
True. Because the whole kingdom has fallen apart. Everything's decayed. Everything's ruined. And it mentions here that some of the big bosses, or at least this one here, Blight Ganon, that they're kind of... What's the word they've used here? What's a word for like a subset or a reforming of a shard, kind of? It's like a shard of Ganon, but not a shard. There's a word I'm looking for, but I'll find it later. But it kind of implies that the bosses of this area are
One could argue that it's remnant. It's a remnant of Ganon.
Could be remnants. But who's to say that the reason everything fell apart... I mean, because Ganon got a hold of the Triforce in the Downfall timeline. That is the air quotes fact.
Right.
Air quotes by my own design. But the theory is that he got a hold of the Triforce. He became essentially all-powerful and got to do whatever he wanted to. Everyone else in the world had to band together to destroy him.
Right, but they didn't technically destroy him. They had to seal both him and the Triforce in the Sacred Realm.
Or the Dark World, according to the book.
Well, according to the timeline back here.
Yeah.
But according to in the writings here, he hasn't yet.
Still the Sacred Realm.
Yeah.
Because him going there would essentially turn it into the Dark Realm.
Right.
Because he's going with the Triforce. But basically these big bad bosses are portions of Ganon, and I'm wondering if the reason everything went to hell and back, and the reason the reason the town was destroyed 100 years ago, what if all of these things were not summoned by Ganon, but forms left over from them destroying him, or not destroying, but stealing him away? What if being all powerful with the Triforce and all that, instead of simply, say for example, they cut him and his finger falls off and it turns into one of these creatures?
Right.
What if these are bits of Ganon that were left behind that over time kind of became these demonic creatures?
Right.
Because who's to say that whenever Ganon dies and leaves, or gets stealed away, and let's say he gets his arm chopped off, who's to say that arm doesn't still have the power of the Triforce and that demonic drive that is so heavily in Ganon?
Right.
Because these things, they don't show up in any other game. They show up only in this one. And if the game happens after Ocarina of Time, if this is Ocarina of Time Link, then we need to wait. There's got to be a reason as to where all of these shown up from. And I kind of find it hard to believe that Ganon just summoned all of them.
Right, right. And it wouldn't make sense, It does say he turned into Ganon, but why would he be Calamity Ganon? I mean, Calamity Ganon...
Yeah.
I mean, he seems powerful, don't get me wrong, but he seems like a shadow of his former self. Like, he seems chaotic. Almost like in Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons when they were trying to resurrect him, but they weren't able to use Zelda's blood. And because they weren't
Yeah.
able to use Zelda's blood, he came back, but he was just a raging beast. And that's more
Here's
what
the word
that
they
seems
used.
like.
The word they use is manifestations.
Ah, yeah.
So they're not really parts of him or summoned by him. They're almost like dream forms of him.
Right. Now, something interesting, though, if we do place them here, is because the first death of actual death of Ganon is with A Link to the Past, which would place it after the events of Breath of the Wild if we place it here. But a thought here is that we know for a fact that he's able to kind of split a portion of his power off and send it into the Light Realm, because he does that with Agnem, which is the first villain, and we think he's just a wizard, but then it does say that he's his alter ego, that he's put a little bit of power in Agnem and has kind of possessed him or become him, even though he's able to roam the Light Realm.
Yeah. And that's the real question there, though, is how does he get his portion of power through to the Light Realm?
Right. Because
there has to be an opening somewhere.
Right.
And the Light Realm is sealed.
Yep.
Frequently. Not all the time, of course.
Yeah. In fact, it's only because of Agnem that Link is able to enter the Dark World.
Yeah.
But we know that Ganon is able to do that because he did it with Agnem before Link is pulled into the Dark World. So Link eventually finds a way to travel back and forth, but Ganon's already figured it out. Some way. We don't know what it is, but he's been able to do it already.
He has, and that's kind of been his, not to say winning streak, but his secret weapon this entire time, because no matter how many times we seal him away, he breaks free at some point, or his minions summon him back at some point. And usually it's just because he's put a manifestation there to force these people to do this, or to tempt them into doing it.
Absolutely.
Like when he got sealed in the Twilight Realm, he tempted Zant into breaking into Hyrule.
Right. And that's actually something interesting, because that plays back on Skyward Sword's demise. Demise was sealed. The whole point of the sealing grounds was to seal him, and yet he was still able to change his form to the imprisoned and break free on several occasions. You had to keep
and we also have to take into account that somehow he managed to send Girahim through to do all of his dirty work.
Yes, absolutely. So the
real question is, how are they doing this? Because this is, if at any point the Legend of Zelda gets around to a point of stopping him from doing this, they've won.
Yeah, they've 100% won. At that point, that would have to go at the very end of the timeline, and you would not be able to really put anything behind or after that, unless
it was a different villain entirely, like the Spirit Tracks was.
Right. And I was actually going to bring that in, is a lot of people associate Demise now with every villain. But I honestly, and I've talked to you a little bit about this, that I don't think it is some of them. For instance, the Spirit Tracks King Malladus, I believe.
Yeah, I think Malladus.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
So him, and as well as Vati, I don't believe...
Yes, Vati.
I don't believe those were Demise.
The Ocean King demon thing. Starts with an O or something.
Right.
I forget what it's called.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think those in and of itself are manifestations of Demise. I have my own theory about that. That would take forever.
A whole other video. Yeah. Or podcast.
Yeah, we may keep that for the next one for you guys to overanalyze that.
But I feel like Ganon is the only true embodiment of Demise, and by extension, of course, Aghanim is.
Absolutely.
But
Aghanim... Well, yes, because it is Ganon's power. But even with that, to put it very simply, from what I had stated before, Ganondorf, even in and of himself, as his form of Ganondorf, there reaches a point in which he changes. Like, at first, he doesn't have the same desires that Demise did. His desires don't line up, his wants, his needs even don't line up with Demise's. But at a certain point, and we can get into that later, but there's always a certain point to where he turns, and his desires then match up with Demise's.
And who's to say that those desires ever stopped?
Mm-hmm.
What if he's constantly been needing more and more power, and after the defeat timeline, he wins. He gets Hyrule.
Mm-hmm.
He has the Triforce, he has all power, and if it's not enough, what if it was his greed that caused him to do something else that resulted in Calamity Ganon?
Right, absolutely.
What if it's not a shattered, decaying remnant of Ganon, but a whole new level of Ganon?
One could argue that, just raw, unaltered power.
What if he's becoming semi-godlike?
Yeah. I mean, it is stated that he has powers equal to that of the gods in the way that he's been able to fight them and beat them. Like, Hylia was a
he's
goddess,
gotten to the point where
the only way she could beat him was the way she did, to sacrifice her immortality to bring an end to him. And even that didn't work the way it was supposed to, because when Link finally got the Triforce, he wished for Demise to be dead. Well, no, he wished for the imprisoned to be dead, which did kill Demise, because it was Demise. But that just causes the land to crash down, kill the imprisoned, but he forgot about Girahim. Human mistake, And then Girahim gets Zelda and brings Demise back in the past. So he made
Demise
the mistake.
Curses Link and Zelda to be followed throughout history in all of their reincarnations to be followed by his evil.
Right, so even in her plan to defeat him, which gave up everything that she was, it still didn't work.
So, here's something I just thought about and kind of realized.
Okay.
It would be relatively easy to paint Din as the villain of this entire series.
Mm-hmm.
Simply because she bestowed upon Ganondorf the Triforce of Power.
Mm-hmm.
She decided to give it to him, which giving him the Triforce of Power, him essentially being the reincarnation of Demise and having his evil within him, means that Demise can never die, because Ganondorf never dies. No matter how many times you try to kill him, the Triforce of Power keeps him alive.
Right.
And that kind of becomes the big issue, is if Din had never given him the Triforce of Power, even if he had been greedy enough to get a hold of the Triforce, he could still have been killed.
Right, right.
Din's the one that's been keeping him alive all this time.
Well, there actually is a theory about that, and basically being that in similar ways, we see a lot of things when it comes to mythology with gods, to where they will use humans, or in the cases of the Greek gods, demigods in some cases, to wage wars between themselves. Because they will not partake in wars. Yes, and there's the theory that the three goddesses are fighting, and that they've created these people and chosen their heroes. But the interesting thing there is, if that theory is true, and say they've each chosen their heroes, then why is Hylia regarded as a goddess? Because that would technically be her being on the same level as those three.
What if in the beginning Farour wasn't part of the fight? What if it was just an argument between, let's say, Din and Nehru, and so they created Hylia and Demise? The fight happens, Hylia outsmarts Demise and takes them up into the sky, and the fight never ends. They continue to argue, they continue to bicker and moan, and eventually Farour gets fed up with it. She's done. She creates her hero, Link, and works with Nehru to try and shut down Demise, and shut down Din. Din, being stubborn, doesn't want to lose. She doesn't want to give up the fight, and creates a hero that can never die. So that no matter how many times she gets defeated by Farour and Nehru ganging up on her, she can just turn her head, look away, and say, whatever, my guy's still alive.
Right.
And that would explain the entire Legend of Zelda series if it was the goddesses having an argument.
I see that, but then there's also the idea that it does state that Hylia chooses her hero. And it does state you as Skyward Sword being the reincarnation of the goddess's hero, speaking directly of Hylia.
Oh, true point.
Yeah, so it makes me wonder how that fits in with this. Because, I personally like this theory.
Yeah, the goddess is fighting. It's kind of a humorous spin to put on it.
Right.
But, see, that's something I've always kind of not really complained about, but had issues understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever Skyward Sword first came out, for years, as far as we were aware, there were only 3 goddesses: Din, Nehru, and Ferrol.
Right.
And then now, suddenly there's this goddess Hylia that no one's ever heard of before. And my initial theory, I thought that it was that the goddess Hylia was like the original, and upon losing her godly status, she created 3 goddesses to work in her place.
Right.
The Golden Triad. But even that wouldn't work, because the 3 of them were there to create the world.
And to create the Triforce, which she was placed here to guard.
Yeah, she was placed to guard.
Which is actually something I was about to bring in. So we never get to see Hylia. And...
yeah, we never see her. We just see her Zelda incarnation.
Right, and here's my thought, is with your earlier statement...
Oh, actually, we do kind of see her in the carved statues.
Yes.
Those are statues of Hylia.
Yes. But with your earlier statement, here's a thought I had. Because you talked about Din and Nehru fighting. And having Hylia and Demise. Demise has kind of, one might say, the power of a goddess, right? So, backed by a goddess, he would have that immense power, even over others. Now, that does not mean he is a god, but he has that type of power. Well, by her being good and saving the people, they would revere her and probably call her as a goddess, as many people do, say even to Buddha, because he protected and, all yada.
So what if she wasn't actually a goddess, but was just called one?
Right. What if, and that could potentially lead to her name being forgotten in history and why we never see her later on.
And a lot of what she does, magical-wise, could be explained by Nehru providing assistance. I mean,
absolutely.
If
Din could do it to Demise. If you've got a
god backing you and you make if you got a god backing you and you make a bold statement about raising an island into the sky, if the god's backing you, she'll do it for you.
Yeah, and then there's also the thing, she chooses her hero, but at the time of her choosing her hero, he technically doesn't have any power. It's when but he fights by her side. It's when he's reborn. But what makes him reborn? One could argue that it's her. One could argue that it's the goddess backing her. But your earlier statement of Furore getting fed up with it and saying, okay, I'm going to help you, Nehru. She's the one who causes Hylia's chosen hero to then forever fight by her side.
See, that makes a lot more sense. That actually just kind of sent chills down my spine. That's a theory I can get behind right there.
Yeah. Like, I like that. And I'm losing my voice now.
Of course, that does bring a bit of an issue with the Triforce's unanimity. That's a word I can't say. But if the Triforce isn't whole, even if the pieces are brought together and all that, they're given power by the goddesses.
Right.
They are essentially manifestations of the goddesses.
Right.
So what if that's the reason something always goes wrong? Is that no matter how many times someone wishes for an age of peace or an era of darkness, it won't last because the Triforce isn't working together with itself.
Right.
Because I'm sure Daphne's Nohan's in Hyrule, he had access to the Triforce.
Right.
During any amount of peaceful times, they had access to the Triforce.
Well, there's
Why
also,
not touch it?
in the Golden Era, the monarchs of Hyrule used the Triforce, and that's after Link's Awakening.
Yes, so why not, at any point in time, wish for eternal peace?
Yeah.
Problem solved.
Well, see, that also comes into something I was going to say. If they are fighting amongst themselves, but they're not directly involved with the people, let's say they pit Hylia and Demise against each other, but they're not directly talking to them, going, you need to do this, and this.
Yes, they're basically, they chose their heroes, and now
right.
they chose their champions. They're letting their champions make the choices.
But here's the question. Without the Triforce, why would they fight?
Valid point. The Triforce gives reason for the champions to fight.
Right. That's what I'm thinking.
Mind blown.
Right. What if it's
okay?
What if it's just there and the only
It's
reason
nothing
they
but a
gave
prize.
it power is because they're like, we want them to fight, and therefore we need something for them to fight for.
So it's nothing more than a first place prize.
Yeah, pretty much. And it
And
determined.
and what I was saying earlier is that the reason the history has gone on and the fighting for so long is that no matter how many times Din gets beaten and loses the battle, she basically says, "My guy's still alive. I can still win the war."
Right. Right. And
that's
because
nothing
of
more than what
that,
it is.
her piece of the Triforce, which now lies with Ganondorf, well, in some cases, we won't get into that. But anyway, regardless, her piece would not necessarily last. It would not allow just because of the creation of the Triforce, when the wish was made, it would be granted, but her piece would not allow it to last forever.
Yes, her piece keeps the war going on.
Right.
It gives reiterations of it, and the reason she never lost initially with Skyward Sword is simply because of Demise's curse.
Right.
Demise made the curse, she backed her champion and backed the curse.
Yep.
And that's the reason it continues to go on. And I think the good thing about this is you can kind of see an era of peace between Din and Nehru with the Windfall time. Well, not Windfall. Wind Waker timeline. That's the city in Windfall. Wind Waker. I can't talk today.
Right.
Because at the end of it, they sink Hyrule. Ganondorf is sealed down there, permanently stuck there. The Triforce of Power will never leave his location.
Right.
And as such, Hyrule will never have to worry about the issues again.
Right.
He brought an eternal end to Ganondorf and therefore to Din's fight. And you can see that in the fact that the next two games have nothing to do with the Triforce.
Mm-hmm.
Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, there's conflict, there's battles, there's demonic beings, but there is no fight over the Triforce.
Right.
It is removed from play entirely. So if they were to eventually end all three timelines in some way or another, some Zelda stories could still go on without the involvement of the Triforce.
Right.
Like with another Vati. There could be other plays that come into account.
Mm-hmm. Well, that also brings
So
the question, if you're battling as, say, a god or goddess, and you're having your champions battle it out for you, do you pick one champion, or do you amass an army? All of Vati, Ganondorf, Demise, it may have started with Demise, it may have started with one champion each, because Furor wasn't in there, but all of them could be
other
backed
champions
by Din.
And they may no longer be fighting over the Triforce, but they're still fighting just in general.
Yeah. Because at this point, you've been in an age of war, constant war, just almost constantly. I mean, you have it interrupted by eras of peace, but it's always broken.
What if you realize that you didn't need the prize there to motivate your hero?
Right.
You didn't need the Triforce there to motivate anyone. You just needed a simple cause.
Right.
So Din finds a way to motivate the opponent to fight her, or to try and defend itself, which is probably going to show up in anyways. Or maybe Din's just trying to win the battle in general, and then Nehru and Pharaoh are like, hey, here's your reason to keep fighting.
Right, right. And see, that's like with Minish Cap when Vati is born. He wasn't after the Triforce.
No, he just wanted more power as a wizard.
Right, and he didn't directly go after Zelda. He did that indirectly, only to find out later that the source of power he was looking for was within Zelda.
Yes.
So
and
it wasn't.
Had they been backed by the gods, Din could have just basically told him that. So
yeah.
She's letting the champion make the choices.
Yeah. So I mean,
Nehru, being smart, said, "Hey, yeah, it's right in front of you."
Right. So that's actually really intriguing, to be honest.
That's a very intriguing theory.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm going to be spending quite a while thinking about that one. Holy shit.
And that would also make sense as to it being created by all three, and all three, it would make sense as to why the Triforce, even as a whole, will not distinguish between good or evil. It allows both wishes.
It does. One last question before we end, because we're running short on time here, but I realize that with the theory that the Triforce decays any wish that is made, essentially. Hyrule, no, Hansen, Daphne's, I can't remember his name, Daphne's or Hansen Hyrule. I said that backwards.
Yeah.
That's impressive in and of itself. He wishes, I don't remember his exact words, but I believe he wishes to sink the land of Hyrule and seal it away permanently.
Right.
Not to seal away the Triforce, but to seal away the land of Hyrule itself.
Mm-hmm.
There could potentially be games after Wind Waker and all of that stuff if what we say about the Triforce's wishes decaying.
Mm-hmm.
Essentially, the land could dry out, become reopened, become livable. It may be a long, long, long time from now.
Yeah. Who knows? And we could potentially see the rise of the Triforce again in that timeline.
Yeah, so we could see it return. Which would then create an alternate, well, not an alternate, but a far distant future with multiple places.
Well,
There would, if Hyrule was to return, there could be Hyrule and the new Hyrule that they created in Spirit Tracks.
Right. And it would be along the same lines of doing like the Downfall timeline did, where with A Link to the Past, after you finish that, you leave and you go through the Oracle of Ages, Oracle of Seasons, and then Link's Awakening, but then it jumps back to Hyrule again.
Yeah, because it has the holodrum and...
yeah, so even with him leaving, it does go back to it. Now, I just read this in a section called The Omnipotent Triforce, and here's something to think about Ganon, because Ganon did use the Triforce to make a wish in the Downfall timeline. And so here's something it says.
He did, didn't he?
It says, a strong heart, innate ability, and a balance of the three virtues, power, wisdom, and courage, are required to be granted a wish. Now both Zelda, Ganon, I say both, and Link, because at the end of of A Link to the Past, he uses it to wish everything undone by Ganon. So all three of them have successfully wished on the Triforce. So this means that all three of them has a balance of all three virtues.
Wait, so... Sorry, one more time, what can you read that again, that passage?
Absolutely.
Like, I heard it, and I was, like, trying to comprehend it, and then you went on, and I was like, wait, hold on, I'm lost. I'm still trying to figure out what you said.
Yeah, I understand. I'm sorry.
No, it happens. I think slow. It's like a strong heart, innate ability, and wisdom, was it?
A strong heart, innate ability. So you got a strong heart and basically just skilled. And it says, and a...
Is that what innate means? I always thought innate meant like incomprehensible, like bad.
No, innate is within, and then ability would be just like being skilled. So just you're naturally skilled, so to speak.
Okay, I always read innate ability as being not skilled.
Oh, wow. And then...
well, I've been thinking that word wrong my entire life.
And then, and a balance of the three virtues, which is power, wisdom, and courage. So a balance of the three are all required to be granted a wish.
So that makes things kind of weird, though, because if you have to have a balance to make a wish, then does that mean that any of them have ever truly wished on the Triforce?
Well, we know Link has.
He at what point touched the Triforce and made a wish?
That's at the end of A Link to the Past. It actually shows a cutscene of him walking into a chamber with the Triforce there. He walks up to it, he makes his wish, and then as the credits are rolling, it shows his wish fulfilled. So we know that he has.
So Link to the Past Link had a balance of all three.
Now, the others I do not know. And this is where...
I know that Ganondorf tried to touch the Triforce in the Sacred Realm, and it split into the three chunks.
Yes, and that's where it says, if one who does not possess the balance of the three virtues touches the Triforce, its three pieces split apart.
And it finds worthy wielders. So we know that Ganondorf does not have that balance, and that's pretty apparent. He's way too power hungry.
Which actually kind of fits something of that I've said about Ganon in and of himself, that form being the actual reincarnation of Demise, so to speak. And
yes.
And Demise, if you're going to place something for your people to fight over, your champions, Hylia and Demise, in its original state, or in their original state, why would you why would you place it to where they could not use it? So Demise in and of himself would not be able to, or would theoretically be able to use it, as well as Hylia in and of herself. But here's the thing. Ganondorf, when he tried to use it, in the form of Ganondorf, it split into 3 pieces. However, in the Downfall timeline, he reclaims the other 2 pieces as Ganon, claiming the one from Link and the Triforce of Wisdom from Zelda, and using the entire Triforce, it turned the Sacred Realm into the Dark Realm.
I just realized something.
What?
In that sentence right there, Link from Ocarina of Time has to be dead.
Why do you say that?
For Ganon to have claimed the Triforce from him.
Yeah, and it does say he
did. It can't be the Ocarina of Time Link.
But here's the thing. What about Zelda? Well, he claims it from her, but then it says Zelda and the 7 Sages seal him. It does specifically state that Zelda did.
Who's to say she doesn't still have her magic?
Yeah, but wouldn't she have to be dead?
She is still the descendant of Hylia.
If he could take it from her without killing her, could he not take it from Link without killing him?
Maybe she has a kid before he kills her?
Who knows?
Anyways, guys, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening into our first ever podcast of Overanalyzed.
Right, we hope to have more.
Hopefully, if we can ever find time. We're both working alternate schedules all the time.
Oh, yes.
We almost missed this one today because we both had shit to do.
Right.
Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like, share, and subscribe the audio-only video. And stay tuned for more. See you guys in the next one. Bye.